everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Dylan Stafford. I'm the Assistant Dean and the host of this Drive Time podcast, episode number 86, featuring Kyle Brauer, our brand new entering FEMBA Council president. Thanks for joining us as live guests. We will have some time to ask Kyle questions, probably maybe 30 minutes from now, 40 minutes from now, depending. And we'd love, any reflections. I know many of you are friends and even family, and definitely fans, one and all. And for those of you who are new admits, who are listening to this as a recording later in the future, we're just appreciate your attention. And we really want to give you an inside sneak peek about UCLA Anderson from one of our right now student leaders. One of the taglines is, we share success, we drive change. And there's so much that happens at Anderson, just so much that happens, jargon and special terms, and it's a world unto itself. UCLA is a world unto itself, and within UCLA is Anderson, and within Anderson is the fully employed MBA program. And to really maximize this journey, you have to learn some new vocabulary. It's just like learning a foreign language. You have to learn new and different nouns and verbs to really navigate. And one of my many intentions with these first-person interviews is to support that journey and allow people to get more comfortable with the language of the fully employed MBA program, such that when they are in it already and heading towards the finish line, or if they are, more people, or they are considering it for the future, really to help accelerate your learning curve. So that's a little background. Today's guest, Kyle Brauer, class of 2023. Kyle is a double Bruin, went here undergrad by way of the community college system, which gives him even a different perspective. We're going to talk about that. He is a career reinventor, from music to state government to a brand new endeavor that we're going to talk about, where he's looking at creating a company and using the resources of the business creation option pathway and Anderson overall to do that. He is a servant leader through and through, and I think you're going to hear that so much. He's very humble, and I love that. He's actually, brand new in the role, just elected, just getting his feet wet, and already people are like, hey, can I put a microphone in front of your face and record it for all of posterity? So he's very game, but he's also very humble. And as we compared notes and prepared, he's actually inventing, like, what kind of leader am I going to be? And as a linchpin within the executive board, several of whom are here today with us, what kind of fingerprint, what kind of mark, what kind of legacy will the 2022, 2023 student government impart? And there are elements of equity, diversity, and inclusion. There are elements of lots of things, and we're going to get to hear about that. So with no further ado, Kyle, thanks very much for being with me today with such an iconic backdrop. Which backdrop do we choose for those of watching who don't know UCLA and all the beautiful iconography and backgrounds?
Yeah, thanks, Dylan, for having me today. I believe this is Royce Hall. Yeah, so this is across from Powell Library. It's iconic, as you mentioned. Funny enough, typically people take their wedding photos or graduation photos from the other direction than this image. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But yes, it's beautiful over at UCLA.
When you were an undergrad, did you have a sort of a favorite Vista? Because UCLA is a 420-acre urban park. And did you have a place to go when you needed just some perspective or fresh air?
Yes, but fresh air was not on the table. I actually loved going into Powell Library to do my homework. There was something about the beautiful architecture and seeing the light come in from the roof windows. And I would spend a lot of time trying to find a desk there with a charger, which was quite difficult to do. So usually I ended up in the basement, which wasn't as beautiful. In terms of the outdoor retreats, I would always take walks in the sculpture garden, which is in North Campus. And yeah, I have lots of fun memories there.
Yeah, it's this August is my 20-year anniversary, and I followed my wife with her promotion to Los Angeles. I had a tiny little foot in the door job my first year as a class manager for the class of 2004, and this is the 19th year I'm accountable for the admissions journey for the fully employed MBA program. And you get numb to it, except you don't. I can now, with the new Marian Anderson Hall, I can step outside and walk, and it's 4 minutes to the sculpture garden, and to get to see all the beauty over there is it's just so wonderful to get, more people. It's so wonderful to get to work in Los Angeles and be able to step outside and yeah, see the sunshine and, versus being trapped in a big tower. So, well, thank you so much. Thanks for your service to FEMBA Council in your first 2 years. Congratulations on being our incoming student body president. Why don't we just do a little reverse chronology, and if you would give people a little background, because you had almost a non-traditional path, one might say, in a couple different ways before you arrived at UCLA Anderson. So tell us about yourself.
Absolutely. So I would call my path non-traditional. I'll start from part of the beginning, which I will mark as high school. So when I was in high school, I discovered a love for classical music, and I poured my heart and soul into becoming a violist, which, for those of you who don't know, is just like a larger violin played on the shoulder. And I took music electives of all kinds. I even did jazz viola in my last year.
Jazz viola, that's a thing.
Jazz viola.
Neat. Okay.
It was for me. I don't think it's really a thing.
Oh, okay.
But I made it work. And I did extracurricular orchestras, chamber groups, all sorts of things like that. And I wanted to become a musician. So I got into, actually, there's a funny story there. I did rounds of auditions in the Midwest and Northeast at various music schools. And in fact, I got caught in a blizzard after a flight got delayed till very early in the morning, right before an audition. So that's a story for another time. If anyone wants to know, you can ask me later. But after all those auditions in 2010 and 2011, I ended up getting accepted to Indiana University, which has a pretty well-known music school in the Bloomington campus. So that's Southeast Indiana. And I went there for a year. I had a wonderful time, but I decided music wasn't right for me. I saw my future, as I like to tell people, where I knew that my options were pretty constrained. And I just had this suspicion that I wanted to do something different with my life than become an artistic tradesperson. And I mean that in a really positive light, because I think that music is a lot like sports, is a lot like trades. You spend so much of your time becoming a specialist at a particular thing. And I guess I knew that I wanted to be more of a generalist, which you'll hear more about later. So I left the school, went to community college, and really just took my time. I took all sorts of different classes. Actually, kind of by accident, I ended up taking a lot of the classes I would need to transfer. And as a backdrop, I had no idea what I was doing. I was unfamiliar with academics. I didn't really focus on them in high school. So this was kind of a new way for me to appreciate learning. And I really attribute my love for learning now to the experience I had in community college, where I got to experiment and just have great experiences. So one series of 2 classes in particular were classes I took on environmental studies, and that really informed my views and my understanding of things like ecology, climate change, as it stood in 2013, 14 or so. And that informed a lot moving forward. But I ended up settling on political science, which is what I used to transfer into UCLA. And while I was a community college student, I was also I worked part-time for spending money, I guess. And I worked at a storage unit facility in North Hollywood, a family-owned business. I knew the owner. I got the job, honestly, because my dad knew the owner, who was contemplating selling. So I feel like I got super lucky that way, but hey, it worked out. I got a chance to get some real service experience. And for people who have worked in the service industry, you understand. And for everyone else, it's a humbling period to deal with people coming to you with all sorts of issues and problems, which may have nothing to do with you. And then it's your job to sit there and figure it out. Especially because I was the only person in the office. We had a 1-person office. I was responsible for managing the facility and just opening up, locking up, taking payments, all that. And one moment that I want to reflect on from that period was one that maybe was one of the more pivotal moments in terms of my views of the world and what really informed my understanding of injustice. This was someone who was a customer who came to me periodically. He was a biker guy. He wore leather, drove a motorcycle or rode a motorcycle, super loud, but he was the nicest guy. And, he was just a customer to me for a long time until one day he came into the office and he just wanted to talk. So we got to chatting. And over time, he actually told me about this surgery that was coming up for him. And he was really, really anxious about it. And the reason he was anxious was not just because it's a surgery, but also because he wasn't sure how he was going to pay for it.
Wow.
And he also had a very small, if maybe even non-existent support system where it was really just him and his daughter. I didn't know much about the daughter, but the reason why I want to reflect on that is someone who goes to the person at the storage unit to tell them about their surgery, their impending surgery and their financial worries, and just not knowing much about the future, I think tells me personally a lot about how fragile some people's social and economic lives can be. And that was a window into a type of world that I'd never seen in my life. So that was really shocking, but also flattering because he chose to come to me to tell me that. And for some reason, I was able to give him some level of comfort. So I think about that all the time. And on a similar note,
Wow.
at community college, yeah, I mean, it was really,
like that's different than I'm waiting tables and just getting tips. That's just that's a deeper lesson than many of us take from our first jobs in the quote unquote world.
yeah, well, that may be true, but I certainly don't envy people waiting tables who get berated by customers. That's a whole different level of humility that you need to
that
learn.
was how I spent my summers, waiting tables. So and then but that was while you were in high school or while you were in junior college?
That was while I was in community college. Yeah.
In community college, excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to reflect on community college as well because when I was there, I met people who were also from totally different backgrounds than I could ever have imagined. And so this was the other window I had into the world as it is. And these included people who were parents who never finished their degree, who were going back maybe their third, fourth, fifth, or even sixth year at community college because they could only afford either in time or money to take one class at a time. But we're still working to get their AA. That was one segment, all the way to students who just had the ability to go to a 4-year, but they decided it's better for my parents to save money, so we're going to do 2 years here and then transfer. And the whole gamut of people was really apparent at community college. So that's why I'm such a fan, because the exposure to different types of people from different backgrounds is really key. So then, after finishing my my several years at community college, I was lucky enough to be able to transfer into UCLA as an undergrad, where I did major in political science. And at UCLA, I learned so much. It was really, I think it was like the flourishing of my my appreciation for learning. In fact, one of my favorite classes was a class on constitutional law, which I took in my first quarter. And I didn't really expect to like it. I don't know what I expected, honestly. But some of the cases we learned about were really quite fascinating and taught me so much about how we have come to where we are in terms of how the US government works. And for some reason, that just struck a chord with me. Yeah.
In our notes, continuous unabashed community college supporter. I grew up in a small town of 20,000 people, and maybe 20% of my high school friends went to 4-year colleges. The vast majority of people from Denison went to Grayson County Community College. And that was, that's where the majority of people that I went to high school with went. And, and associate's degrees were kind of enough to have a trades life or a good life in Grayson County, Texas, back at the end of the 80s. In the California Master Plan, the Community College Network, the California State University System, the UC system, were designed to all three provide ladders of access to meet people where their circumstances have them start. And there's supposed to be mobility between the systems. And you're kind of, sharing the story of the system doing what it was ever hoped that it might achieve back in the 60s, which is wherever people get on the escalator is fine. And, the escalator's going up. So if you start with community college and then go to Cal State and then go to UC, I mean, you skip the Cal State, but, your story is one of what the system could be for our society, which is just to meet people where they start, because people have very different starting points in a very complex society such as ours, as both of your examples made clear. So, tell us about, and then some, you called it leaving Plato's cave. You want to elaborate more? If you already spoken to that?
I did say that. Maybe that was too poetic. Maybe I'm giving myself too much credit. But honestly, my experiences both as a property manager and as a student at community college really were like leaving Plato's cave. And what I mean by that is I had a really lucky upbringing where I didn't have to worry about whether we could eat, whether I would go to school. I didn't have to think about any of those kinds of things that I realized a lot of the people that I met had to worry about, both in community college and working part-time. And I will clarify that the storage facility I worked at was a discount storage place in a relatively poor area. So we had many people experiencing homelessness actually as customers, and they were using the units because they lost their job.
Wow.
They maybe got kicked out of their apartment, and they were just truly on the margins. So that's what I mean about leaving Plato's cave, when you have to sit there and the requirements of the business are such that you tell someone that they now owe a late fee, even though they just lost their job. That's a hard thing to do. And I made a lot of decisions where I would be lenient with some people to the extent that it was possible, but ultimately you're pitting the human need against the reality of the business. And I think that that's something that has echoes today in so many ways. And it's definitely informed my perspective.
Another part of your story, we call it your service journey, and your appreciation of volunteerism as a way to spend your time and energy, which I always appreciate. FEMBA Council. I mean, we have 50 different clubs and organizations at Anderson. That's lovely. Commercial for that. What I appreciate about FEMBA Council, though, is that's the one club or organization that has the breadth to make a contribution to a student body of 900 people. All the other clubs tend to have more of a niche focus and do what they do very, very well, but to a subset, contrasted to FEMBA Council, which really is, it's the bridge between the needs of the student body right here, right now, and the administrators and faculty who make the decisions of how the school is going to move forward. And with that pipeline, we can be as nimble as it is possible to be in a state, in a large state entity such as UCLA. But everybody's a volunteer. No one gets paid for the hours that FEMBA Council requires. So, talk a little bit about how volunteerism became part of your worldview. How did you, how were you introduced to it, and what does it mean to you now?
Yeah, it's funny because looking back on it, I never really thought of it that way until I was contemplating this discussion. And I've realized that since I was in community college, I've been volunteering in some capacity without even thinking about it really. It's just something I wanted to do. When I was in community college, I was part of this transfer students honors club, and then I decided to volunteer to be part of the leadership team of that. I was a student government volunteer at undergrad with USAC, which is the undergraduate student government here at UCLA. I did a lot of research on their policy team, which involved advocacy for students, um, which is actually pretty interesting because there would be teams of undergrads who would go out to Washington and Sacramento, and they would try to get meetings with representatives and their staff. Usually it was staff, but they would say, hey, we noticed these bills, which I would find with my team, and we would say, we believe that this would be a benefit to the students at UCLA. So we did some work like that. Um, when I graduated UCLA and got my job as a state auditor, I even volunteered as one of the party planning committee people at the office. So, and it's more of a social thing, but it's still volunteerism.
Yeah.
Then I carried that forward, doing various neighborhood trash cleanups in West Sacramento there. And when starting FEMBA, I joined FEMBA Council because I knew I wanted to be a part of student leadership. And I guess for me, it's almost innate. But upon further reflection, it's become more intentional in later years. And I think the reason for that is I see volunteering as an amazing way to connect with people and to share. And I think sharing and connecting are things that sound quite simple, but at the end of the day, that's powerful. If you can work with somebody with the motive only to help, and the motive is then turned into action from doing that help, then you have almost a pure interaction with someone. And I don't think you can get that when you're paid to do something. I don't think you can get that when you're told to do something. So there's something about volunteerism where people come together from that human level to do something together. And we see that across the world. People love to volunteer. So that's my motivation for volunteering. I love the experience of connecting, and giving back is just great. It feels great.
And I appreciate the emerging philosophy, and just to go very tactical for someone who's listening to this in the future. Well, gosh, how do I get involved? Gosh, I love to say, gosh, how do I get involved in FEMBA Council? Like, what was the role what was your entry point into what's now become your third year of service on FEMBA Council?
Well, at Leadership Foundations, which was the orientation, I guess you would say, for the FEMBA program, the then FEMBA Council leadership came and presented and said, we are FEMBA Council. We are a student club, which does all these fun things on the social side. And then we also help run and organize more of the administrative things that really support our students. You just need to sign up for this application. And then when you sign up for the interest form, you then run against each other, which is kind of a shame. And then the people who win those rounds get to become either a social or a academic or career representative for their class section. And we have about 20 or 30 folks who do that at the start. So it's really about stepping up and being willing to put yourself out there and possibly compete with your soon-to-be classmates or your current classmates. But I think what really comes through are the people who want to be there, people who want to put themselves out there, who want to do something on behalf of others. That's where, if you're that kind of person, that's the home that's for you in the FEMBA program.
And yes, and everyone won't get a seat who desires a seat. And that's where the other 49 clubs and organizations are useful. There are lots of nooks and crannies at Anderson. And I think we do leadership very well in a very chaotic, real world kind of way. I'm always looking for metaphors, and, there's no recipe for Anderson. I think there are many recipes. I think what we offer is a pretty robust chef's kitchen and a pantry full of ingredients. Former interim dean Al Osborne had a lovely speech that he loved to give about crashes. You're going to come to a place like Anderson, you're going to crash. You're going to crash into people you would have not met otherwise. Your example of the gentleman, the biker with the fear and the healthcare insecurity and the dependent daughter. That was a person you'd not met up to that moment in your life. And that a university is a universe. It is a coming together of people who wouldn't have met were it not for the existence of the universe. And Al loved to talk about crashes in a positive sense, like, oh my, we just overlapped. And that's fascinating. Back to your volunteerism, that there's a purity or a authenticity or something available that in a non-paid, non-hierarchical, it's not a boss employee relationship. It's not a customer business, paid transaction. Volunteerism, we're all here because we want to be here. Why are you here? Like, you can answer that question very differently if it's an arm's length transaction. There's nothing else going on in the background. That's great. Well, so a person can be in FEMBA Council as a first year student, and then the roles accelerate. But now, all the way to the end of the program, you're the president. You have an executive board. Tell us a little bit about what it's like. What do you mark as your starting date? Are we 3 weeks in or a month? I'm not even sure.
Well, probably about a month.
About a month.
It feels like longer, but looking at the calendar, yeah.
So tell us, looking at the year ahead, how are you approaching it? Tell me about your executive board. How are you going about the execution of this opportunity?
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer, because on the one hand, we want to make sure that we're doing the things that worked in the past while also seeking that improvement for the future. So right now, it's a lot of hurry up and wait. And what I mean by that is, let's get our bearings, figure out who is doing what, who wants to do what, what's the temperature of the students, um, who in the FEMBA program on the administration side and on the programmatic side are really the key partners that want to help us, and who we want to help in terms of improving the experience in the long term. So that's what I mean about hurry up and wait. Everybody's eager to get going, and we're all volunteers, so that means that we have limited time. We don't have a salary or anything like that. So I feel as though a lot of my job has been aligning everybody and then making sure that people don't burn out. So that's the start. In terms of the kind of goals and the execution, I would say that first, as much as we're tired of talking about it, we have to think about navigating the pandemic. So this means that for right now, maybe we can do many more in-person events, probably more on the outdoor side, but we frankly don't know how things are going to look in 6 months, in 9 months, in a year, which happens to be my term. So I think we just need to be really honest and accept that if we plan a lot of events that are going to be in person, there's the possibility that a new variant comes and kiboshes all of our hopes and dreams for that particular event. And I think just reminding people that that's on the horizon is helpful, because it's more along that hurry up and wait philosophy where, yes, we can get excited, but have a mind to your plan B. How can we make sure that things can still work if we have to make accommodations as a result of the pandemic? So that's one thing. Another thing is, since we have this really wonderful starting point of a new leadership board, what opportunities do we have now with new people who are motivated to make more foundational changes that can reverberate throughout, hopefully, the FEMBA Council and maybe the Anderson community at large? And one of those things is, how do we thread EDI into the whole organization? And EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusion, can include so many things. So it can be a little bit overwhelming at times. But fundamentally, what I've really learned in the past year is some simple questions can help guide this process. So the first is, who's at the table and who's not at the table? When you think about that, you realize, oh, I didn't think of that. Perhaps people from this community are not having an input on a decision that might affect them disproportionately. That could be a problem. So maybe we want to seek out specific feedback. Thinking about thinking about that, I mean, I just think that there's so many opportunities to put that into action with respect to things like event planning, because if you have an event that requires you to be, we're talking about in person. So let's say an event that requires a high concentration of people in one spot, and then the pandemic flares up with a new variant, people who may be uncomfortable for any variety of reasons would not necessarily want to go to an event like that. So now they don't have an option to go because perhaps they cannot get a vaccine for their children. It's not safe. Perhaps they have a health condition that makes them puts them at higher risk to attend an event like that. So that these are the kinds of conversations that we're trying to seed as we go. Separately, there's preferences. You know, maybe you just don't want to do a drinking event, or maybe you want to be outside and you're looking for an outdoors kind of event, and you notice that all the council events aren't outdoors. So just having a broader mind to the types of things we can do is really helpful from that EDI perspective. So I hope that's resonating, but it's really been an amazing learning experience for me.
Well, I love, you know, equity, diversity, and inclusion, term of art. We acronym everything here. It becomes EDI. Other places, you know, DIE, you know, but I like that there's a series of questions one can ask. And one of them is, you know, who has a seat at the table? Are there other questions that you've begun to ask as you, because last week we had the pleasure of interviewing with Carol Ann Link, and her topic was allyship, you know, a necessity for leadership and learning in life. And, you know, an awareness, you know, how do you bring an awareness, you know, like just as a leader, okay, I'm interfacing with a population of human beings, and within that population of human beings, there are subpopulations of other human beings, and inclusion is eliciting the time and the talent and the energy of all the people who want to contribute. And, you know, how do we bring a lens that looks for that? So looking to see who has a seat at the table. Are there other questions that you ask?
Absolutely. And I was going to save Carol Ann for my shout out, but now we're talking about her.
All right, let's start talking about Carol Ann.
Carol Ann has been an amazing teacher of this for me, and I thank her tremendously for helping me learn more about EDI. She's also the VP of EDI on the leadership team. So yeah, we're working on this quite a bit. Thinking about allyship, some other questions include, so we talk about who's present. And if you do have people present, thinking about, as a leader, who is talking in this conversation. So sometimes it can be as simple as, oh, I happen to notice that this person isn't speaking up. And that may not be for any particular reason on the part of identity necessarily. That could be because of personality differences. So are extroverts having a much stronger presence at the table? Now, if it is on account of identity, maybe that's something that we need to think about more carefully, because we can have kind of this tendency to do what in the EDI world is called creating an oracle out of somebody. So asking someone to speak on behalf of their identity is not fair, because no one can speak on behalf of everyone else. But it's something that tends to happen. What is fair, though, is making sure that people who share and have different types of identities are in a room where they're comfortable to voice their concerns. So I don't know if I can give any specific tips other than try to solicit. I try to solicit information from everybody with whom I'm speaking, because often the more different your leadership team is, the more times you say, oh, wow, I never even thought about that. Or, oh, wow, I never even thought about that. That's kind of problematic. So I would say one of the main questions is not just who's at the table, but who is speaking at the table. And then trying to dig into that a little bit.
People are probably tired of me talking about Hamilton, but I love Hamilton. I listened to the soundtrack for April, May, and June of 2020. It really got me through the start of the pandemic and into the middle of the summer. I just listened to it over and over and over. And, you know, I want to be in the room. I want to be in the room where it happens, and I'm not throwing away my shot. And, each of us has a voice. And if we each have singular gifts, and if one way to spend one's life is to look for the maximum opportunity to pay my gifts forward. So that helps me. Who is in the room? Are we bringing people into the room? What is our pipeline? And then once people are in the room, are they, I love imposter syndrome. That when you have a status shift, you feel like an imposter. You go from high school to college to graduate school, part-time job to your first full-time job, dating to boyfriend, girlfriend, dating to marriage. All of those status shift stair steps bring with them the anxiety and angst of, can I do this? And how do we create, especially in a school like a graduate school of management, how do we create an environment? You're in the room. We want you in the room. We, as an admissions dean, we didn't admit you as a test. We admitted you because we hear that you have a shine, and if you let your diamond shine, you will polish and illuminate the diamonds around you. And diverse points of view help people solve complex challenges. Well, I never saw it from that point of view. I had no idea that a subset of our customers aren't just storing their things, they're actually surviving possibly the most traumatic chapter of their life as they've been, unemployed and lost their apartment. And they're not just storing in our self-storage unit, they're actually co-housing because society doesn't have a place for them anymore. And now we've placed this young gentleman, Kyle, in the not so easy position of being rent collector to people who are using self-storage on the lower socioeconomic side of town as a makeshift security net. Whoa, what does Kyle have to say about this topic? That's an experience set where his voice is going to help us have a more sophisticated response to one of the many complicated challenges that the world is going through. So sorry, I can start riffing, but these are things, if we do our job well, we invite diverse points of view into our student body, and then now we have to encourage people to speak and recognize that different people get intimidated at different moments. For some people it's curricularly, for some people it's extracurricularly, for some people it's socially. This goes, that we have a lot of people who are very, very intelligent, but the let's stand around and and drink beer on the on the tarmac, that's as terrifying for that person as core accounting is for a history major in my case. So and yet our job is also to challenge people and encourage people to grow in a safe environment. And getting the mix right on that in 2022, I think, is, not to mention the in-person, remote, hybrid triad that we are wrestling with. Like, what is our core competency? What is the right mix? And how do we meet people where they are? And not everyone wants to self-disclose, hey, I have asthma, I have an underlying health condition. Carol Ann was educating me last week about the desire to mainstream. If I am in a population that's possibly underrepresented, I don't necessarily want to draw that, the Oracle thing. Oh, Dylan, tell us, what do Catholics from Texas feel about this topic? I'm like, when did I become a voice person for Catholics from Texas? I was Presbyterian when I left Texas. I only became Catholic out here, right? I'm not the Oracle. So it's challenging. It's challenging stuff.
Yeah, and just to comment on that,
please.
I think simply sharing those thoughts and normalizing the conversation about all these issues and the fact that, yeah, maybe I am a Catholic from Texas, but I don't know much about Catholics in Texas right now,
Yeah.
but I can tell you about me. And I think framing conversations like that really helps underscore the fact that we are groups, we're also individuals. And to combat something like imposter syndrome, to make Anderson an easier place to work in and to socialize in, requires that people in leadership make it an easy environment to do those things. And what that means is, as I was describing before, expanding the types of activities that go on. Because if, for example, somebody is feeling imposter syndrome and they just really, I just don't want to be around people drinking because I feel uncomfortable. If there's no alternative,
Yeah.
then they won't do anything. That doesn't seem fair. Whereas for that person who's struggling with core accounting, it's not that we lower the bar and say that accounting should be easier. It's how do we ensure that the brand and the culture of Anderson is what we say it is? It's collaborative. How do we prove that to people? That if you come in, you're not going to be thrown to the wolves, so to speak, and have to balance your income statement and your balance sheet with no support. If you can show that, yes, there's tutoring. Yes, students group up together. Yes, in fact, we have all these stories of people who say, wow, so-and-so, they just gave me their whole afternoon and basically taught me accounting. And I didn't know my classmates could be so nice. If we can elevate those stories, then we can really push what we hope Anderson to be and make it more of a reality.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. And I'm looking at the time. I know we have several guests today and we have several fans. We have some fans of Kyle, friends of Kyle. Is that a thing? We'll create it as a thing. If anybody would like to either ask a question or offer an acknowledgement, it's so fun to have guests even as we're recording this for posterity. But I wanted to pause for a minute. If there were any questions, just maybe turn on your camera or wave at me or raise a digital hand. I only have a couple more questions. All right, Debbie, hi.
Hey, glad you invited Kyle to this talk. He's got a wealth of interesting perspectives, and it's just a cool dude all around. So, Kyle, I have a question.
Well, and let us know who you are so people understand.
Oh, hi, I'm Debbie Marone, classmate of Kyle Brauer, FEMBA 2023, and we are on a BCO team together. And I've had the pleasure, even if it's been a brief amount of time, getting to know this wonderful man and his thoughtfulness and not only intelligence, but emotional intelligence. So one thing I would like to ask is, what have been, even with the pandemic and everything, we were talking about this the other day, there's been some, what recommendations would you have for students who are getting back to campus? Because you touched on this, is like taking advantage of things that you may not have had before, or even opportunities. And what has this taught you, leading during a pandemic, about how to take advantage of opportunities or find your own new opportunities when things aren't perfectly laid out for you, or people are still trying to piece together how to rebuild. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Isn't that the question? I think everybody's asking themselves that, myself included. Well, if it's helpful, I can share what I've done. I spent a lot of time, and I actually did this in my first year, but I spent a lot of time asking people for one-on-one conversations to learn about what they do and to learn about events that have come up. Because for me personally, I actually am much more comfortable in small group conversations. So, and what intimidates me sometimes are those big kind of networking events when I don't know anybody. So that's how I find out a lot about a lot of things. Something that has also been quite helpful is I am constantly looking at the Slack channel, which is a good resource for what is going on. In terms of making things happen, I think that's kind of where there's a lot of opportunity. I think that one thing that I've really learned as a result of my time on FEMBA Council is how important it is to bring a lot of the people who would be impacted by an event into the conversation. So this includes people in programming or administration who would either fund or support or otherwise market an event. And I found that simply by asking someone's opinion, saying, hey, I'm thinking of doing this event, or we're thinking of doing this event, how is there anything I should know, has been amazing in terms of getting a high response rate and a high throughput time on that event. So maybe that's helpful, but I think this speaks to something that I just kind of hold dear, which is this stakeholder thinking, like who is involved in this process and why. and then talking to each of them. And I think you actually do a really good job of this naturally, Debbie. Debbie, for those who don't know, has basically been the BCO whisperer, which is our capstone project, BCO. That's like what it's called. And Debbie has distributed information to the whole class for basically like 2 years.
Well, in BCO, another term of art acronym, business creation option. So the other pathway, if one chooses not to use the global access program option as their master's capstone experience. Debbie, how did you, I'm sorry, because I did promise Kyle not to turn this into Debbie's interview, but I did promise everybody an insight into the business creation option. So maybe both together, tell us a little bit about what you're working on. And even Debbie, how did you become a BCO whisperer? I love that term. Never heard that until right now.
Kyle, that was, I like it. BCO whisperer. I'm gonna defer to Kyle on this because he has done such an incredible job along with Kevin Cohen, who initially started the concept in really creating this business and taking it. I've been on several teams, and I have to say, like, the level of professionalism is just above and beyond. So I'd love to hear Kyle's thoughts on, putting this together, gleaning information about a subject, as we both admittedly have said we have no experience in. And that can be a very kind of anxiety inducing, but also very exciting place to be. So I'm deferring to Kyle on this.
Sure, yeah, I'll jump in. So this is a great way to plug another question that leaders can ask related to EDI, which is not just who's at the table, who's speaking at the table, but where is everyone with respect to anyone else in their own lives? And how might that affect how they behave at or away from the table? So I feel absolutely lucky that I can be on such an amazing team. And what makes the team so great is we have lots of different types of people. We have parents, we have soon-to-be parents, we have single people, we have people in relationships, we have people from different parts of the world. And what that means is, in addition to the benefits that come from that diversity, it means that we just have to think actively about why is it that somebody may or may not be happy with or comfortable with a particular decision, or in our particular case, how do we keep the bar high without making an environment that's hostile for parents or soon to be parents? Because that's an often asked question, like, how can I start a company if I have a baby? I mean, that's I don't know. I've never had a baby. That sounds like an incredibly difficult task. And really just having the conversation and then recognizing that we can reshape expectations in an appropriate way is what's up. And one of the ways we've done that is by tying success not to hours, but to outcomes. And that might sound obvious, but it really requires a disciplined level of thinking and understanding that just because someone's not attending events doesn't mean they don't care. Just because someone isn't showing up on your meeting doesn't mean they don't care. So how do you engage people who can't because of caregiving obligations, for example, but still have so much to offer? And that's just an ongoing question, but we think we're stronger for it. So let me back up and tell you all about what we're trying to do. Fundamentally, we see this massive problem in cities across the world, but especially in the United States. And that is unused space across all over that is really just paved concrete. And what that means is, from a social perspective, that is an ecosystem that got destroyed with a building placed on top. And sometimes those buildings have great uses, sometimes they're housing, sometimes they're essential distribution facilities. But our view is that unless every element of that space is used, there is some waste. So how do we do that? Well, one thing that we're honing in on is solar energy generation. We think there's a massive opportunity. There's an unmet need in terms of renewables in the United States. And we think that increasing the use of renewable energy is a virtuous and economic goal. And to do so, we are trying to build a marketplace platform that will allow you to list that unused space and then allow a solar developer to lease it. And it sounds very simple, but it's, as Debbie alluded to, quite complicated. I think at my latest count, there are 9 different industries that this cuts into through various stakeholders. So that's finance, that's engineering, it's real estate, it's energy, and government, even with permitting and regulation. So those are just a few. But when you put them all together, that's how you get a project. And we're thinking that there's a real opportunity to simplify that process and make it fast, which saves a lot of time and money. And with that, there is economic opportunity.
And so again, for those of you in the future generations hearing this, oh, I have a business idea. Oh, I want to bring that to Anderson. Oh, I want to create a nest where that little baby bird can sit there with no feathers and start to grow and become a viable, new ideas sometimes are like baby birds, is how I was taught in Chicago. They don't have any feathers and they're kind of shivering and they need much, much, much love and care and protection. And so the business creation option pathway with the EVI and the courses that precede it is an entire ecosystem of education through the Venture Accelerator and the Showcase. There's a world of opportunity within Anderson to take the seed of an idea and vet it again and vet it a third time and build alliances and build partnership and accrue membership and scope and scale and minimum viable product and nurture that towards, a moment where it could actually take flight on its own. And I think, what does Professor Shinerock say? About half the BCO projects launch, which is a remarkable outcome. So we're coming up on the top of the hour, and I have one more question, and I don't know if we gave your BCO project enough real estate, because we could probably do a whole hour on, where you are now and where you want to go next. And, but any other maybe high level insights or sneak peeks into the world, so you have a team, you've made a partnership with Debbie. How many people are on your team? Anything else just to kind of help people get like, wow, you could really do that if that was the path you chose to pursue at Anderson?
Yeah, I think that Anderson has a really amazing pathway for this. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I applied to Anderson was because of the BCO opportunity. So I'll speak for posterity, as you've been saying. There are classes that prepare you for finding an idea, developing it, fleshing it out, doing research on that idea, creating a business plan, and then where we are in the current process is more along the lines of validation and customer acquisition at the very onset. And we have 5 team members. All of them are co-founders, which could be non-traditional in a sense, but we think it's right for where we're at. And I can talk about that with anybody offline. And we're planning on using BCO as much as possible to bring together, as you mentioned, these partnerships, opportunities, all these things that only exist because we have the ability to be at Anderson, to accelerate, I guess, our goal. And I think for anyone who wants to do it, who hasn't yet applied or maybe is in their first year, try to give it a shot if you can. I mean, if nothing else, it's an amazing opportunity to learn how to build a team and then work with a team well, go through that rocky process sometimes, but come out better for it. And then, yeah, I mean, if it works, it works. That's amazing. But I think if you want, my experience so far, not that I'm an expert, but what I truly believe is you have to love the process if you want to start a company, or else it's going to be a nightmare, because the whole thing is a process. Every single day is, oh, are we doing enough here? Are we even thinking about like, what haven't we done yet? Are we wrong? Are we right? Who haven't we talked to yet? And that is just iterated every day. And I don't expect that to let up. So if that sounds fun, then maybe it's something worth doing. But if not stay far, far away.
It is not for the faint of heart. And entrepreneurs are not entrepreneurs, they're serial entrepreneurs. And they learn the language of mapping and scoping and scaling and asking for funds and being a jack of all trades, master of none, and yet a force of nature who's willing to. I love Tori Brodsky. A couple weeks ago, we have drink light. I didn't even this. I had arrived. I had ordered my drink light in the mail, and it had not yet come for hers. But it's these are moonlight and daylight little packets. And this is a fellow FEMBA, and she's launched this company. It was early stage before FEMBA, and it's ongoing now during FEMBA. But she said, I noticed that when I had a boss, I got a lot of anxiety. So she'd rather work the long hours of being an entrepreneur for the autonomy that comes with it. She'd rather accept the risk than have to have, a certain kind of life that comes with having a boss. And that's not for the faint of heart. And, and my other one, I love to wave around my little examples. This is small beginnings require bigger dreams, from Stephen Johnson, who was a graduate a year back and was our Wooden Award winner and launched a investment company to support inner city startups and an inner city tutoring firm, another double Bruin like yourself, and an entrepreneur and a person who's willing to think outside the box and ask some non-typical questions. His goal is not to get a job at Google, which is nothing wrong with Google, right? It's nothing about that, but entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. And if one is willing to make that investment in oneself to become conversant in that world, it does open up an entirely different second half of your life. My wife launched her company 12 years ago as a small female-owned business, and it was terrifying to me. But what it has afforded us as a couple is incredible in terms of flexibility. I have the steady Eddie job. She has the spikes and valleys job. And we inform each other as an ongoing partnership. So I very much appreciate your shout outs to working parents, because that's a thing also. And back to mainstreaming, you don't want to be the person but children spell love, Time. And that's, there's just certain things you can't delegate or that you don't want to delegate as a parent. So sorry, I just appreciate your empathy for that subpopulation, So, okay, we're going to go over because you're way too interesting, but I want to end with, and you already alluded to it. So the Brew and Bear Hug. So this is my little mascot. My brother gave me this idea. Said, Dad, Dylan, maybe you could ask your guests, to do a shout out to their favorite faculty so far, a FEMBA friend. You may have already told us who, you may not, it's your choice, and a family member. And so 3 bear hugs, with the idea being, the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. The other one, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to raise a graduate student, especially working professional graduate students spread from San Diego to Seattle to Houston and New York and Boston. I mean, we have this diaspora, especially you all in the massive, never before seen class of 2023, the largest class to ever walk the halls, who started this during a pandemic. I follow your journey because your journey is very, distinct and singular. What you all have chosen to do is somewhat heroic. And from the point of view of nobody succeeds by themselves in a management curriculum. So your three shout outs, if you wanted to put the spotlight on a faculty who's been influential to you, on a friend who's helped you to this point halfway through or 2/3 of the way through, and then a family member.
Of course, yeah. I came prepared. I thought about this ahead of time. For faculty, I'm going to shout out Dean Fratius, who is also teaching this quarter. And the reason for that is Dean Fratius put himself out there to take on the thorny problem of how to do a dual modal class. And what that means is, how do you teach in person and remotely at the same time in a way where the experience is as close for all students as possible, irrespective of your modality. And this came about because on FEMBA Council, we really tried to figure out how we could expand these options for students knowing that in the example of working parents, people who have higher risk as a result of the pandemic, people who are just really far away and they want to save some money maybe, could have an opportunity to learn without making trade-offs they don't want to make. So shout out to Dean Frasius for trying it out. In terms of FEMBA friends, Carol Ann is one. So Carol Ann, as I mentioned, has been an amazing teacher for me and a longtime friend. Well, actually, it feels like it's been a long time, and yet it's only been really less than a year since we've really gotten close. So Carol Ann is absolutely one. The other one is Matt Samita. He was here. He probably left because he was too embarrassed to hear a shout out. That's definitely it. Matt has also been an amazing friend, and we first bonded in a very nerdy way over mechanical keyboards in core. So that's a story for another time. But he's just been really generous and kind and a good friend. In terms of family, of course, it does take a village to raise a graduate student, and I can't thank my parents enough for giving me so much opportunity to be able to make the choices I'm making. It's literally impossible without them. So that's one thing. And then the other person I want to thank with respect to family, and sorry, I can't separate. It's not fair, is my sister, who is probably my best friend. My sister and I are like peas in a pod. We are so similar, and I miss her every day because she lives on the East Coast. So even though she lives far away, we talk all the time, and she keeps me honest. So shout out to them.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for even thinking of it in advance. And can we offer any, can we spotlight one of our guests today, or would that embarrass anybody?
Are you asking me to spotlight a guest?
Well, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but if it were, we have a special guest listening today. If
well,
we could,
I don't know who that would be.
Oh, I was thinking of Miss Obofsky.
Oh yeah. Oh, that is a joke name. She's Valerie Edwards, my mother.
Okay, I didn't know what that meant.
There's probably like a long story behind Obofsky that I can't remember at this exact moment. But yes, that is my mom with the beautiful tree background right there. So right now she's actually cooking. So I assume that's for Passover lunch tomorrow.
Aww.
Which I'm quite excited about.
Well, I love pseudonyms in the whole world of that. And Kyle's mom, thank you very much for all it took to create Kyle and his sister and anyone else in your orbit. We're very grateful for him as a very humble, yet very inspiring and very forward-looking student leader. And we're just grateful to, we're grateful to you all for everything it took to have him be a leader in our student body. So, and hope you make a delicious Passover meal. All right. Well, Kyle, last words are yours. Anything you'd like to leave people with as we come to a close?
Oh, just thanks. I'm having a great time in life, and I'm excited to keep going. So thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you. And let me just share the screen real quick. This has been, as you know, Kyle Brauer, our FEMBA Council president, newly elected, fourth week of the job. And if you just look back, we've been pretty much having an interview a week with some really fantastic people. And these are all on the live guide page on our website. But Carol Ann, many times referred to today, was last week's guest, and Tori Brodsky the week before that. Scott Matthews, who did the program in 2 years, just turbocharged and rose from director to VP. These are just fantastic stories. Haley wanted to get a job in sports management and landed a job with the NBA her first quarter at Anderson from one alumni event. Sarah Anderson, Kyle follows the beautiful high heels of Sarah, her twinkle toes. She was our incredible president last year, and her interview of her journey. Stephen Johnson, referred to a moment ago with the Small Beginnings Require Bigger Dreams, another double Bruin. Married his college sweetheart, whom he met here at UCLA. They have a family of 4, and he is a twice over entrepreneur. Derek Cox is a recent alum who played professional football for 6 years before he came to Anderson, and now has been hired by the NFL to do player development. Wing is our FEMBA co-president and also one of the leaders on FEMBA Council. We had a wonderful Black History panel on healthcare outcomes in underrepresented populations led by Dr. Dominique Cagle, also with Stephen and with Vanessa Nunez, who's a full-time MD, MBA, and Dominique organized that. And our first episode this year was with Will Lysette, who's also co-president with Wing of the FEMBAssadors. And next week, we'll have another interesting guest following in Kyle's footsteps. Next week are doctors Corey Hefferlin and Sagar Rambia, who are ophthalmology residents. So they've already completed their medical training. They're in their residency on South Campus, and they are part of a pilot program created again by Dean Fratius to allow professional residents, postgraduate medical doctors in subfields to earn a FEMBA degree during the residency. And these two brave souls, Corey and Sagar, are the pilots of that program. And we're going to talk to them next week. So it's an honor to get to have these conversations. I get inspired every single week. I fall in love with UCLA more and more and more as I get to meet incredible people like you, Kyle, Carol Ann last week, and looking forward. So if you're a new student, welcome. If you're a current student, thanks for your attention. Debbie, thank you. I think the first time I talked to Debbie, we did a Zoom and she was in Israel. It's just during COVID. And she was all like, da, 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 da. Yes, of course I'm in Israel. And I'm just, and she was like so easy about it. I'm like, oh, I love global citizens. This is awesome. So to circle back, Debbie, and to hear you at this juncture is a treat. So yes, it's a wonderful world. UCLA is a magnet for high aspiration, high potential people with big hopes and dreams. And it's our pleasure to be faculty and be administrators and be staff to support this environment. So thanks everyone for listening. Appreciate your extra attention. That was 8 bonus minutes because Kyle is worth it. And have a wonderful holiday weekend wherever you are right now and whenever you hear this in the future. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Thanks.